Hello everybody, and in this personal games video I'm going to show my first game over this weekend in the Four Nations Chess League, where I was playing in Telford, just outside of Birmingham, in a team event, much like the Premier League in football, except with chess and with fewer injuries. So I was playing for my team on board 2, and I was playing against Peter Davies, who is 172 ECF with a FIDE of, I think, 1990, just under 2000 anyway. I played this game yesterday and was white with a time control of 100 minutes for the first 40 moves, with 50 minutes added on after move 40, and with a 30-second increment lasting throughout the game. So there were some games that went on about 6 hours or more. And I was very, very tired because I hadn't had a good night's sleep, and I'd been driven up from London to Birmingham, which is about 150 miles, 140 miles, which took several hours. So I didn't really want to play such a long game, but I had to. So I played c4, and then he played the move which I love playing against. It really suits me. He played c6, going into a Slav, and I really hate Slavs. If I play d4, then or knight f3, then d5, and black has a very, very solid position, which is incredibly hard to break down, and it would take hours and hours of very painful grinding to win. So I don't allow it. I play e4. Now e5 is an alternative to the move he played, and it leads to a more positional game, which I'm happy to play. I would probably have a slight advantage, but yeah, it'd be interesting. But he played d5 going into the Caracan. The point of c6 was to play d5, so he feels he should play it. Then I capture twice on d5. Then here, if he takes with the queen, leaving me with a worse pawn structure because of my isolated d-pawn, I would have an initiative because I could play knight c3, which would lead to a Scandinavian opening with an advantage for white over the regular Scandinavian because our c-pawns have both vanished. And that means that black's usual plan of castling queenside would be less palatable because of a greater weakness around the black king. And also it means that black does not have the move c6, which would prevent my knight coming to either b5 or d5 at an early stage, putting pressure on him. So he doesn't want that. He plays knight f6. So the idea is to play knight takes d5, keep the knight there, and blockade on the d5 square. Maybe play e6 and knight d7 to f6. So 2 knights would be on d5. And then maybe Finkesso the c8 bishop, just to have complete control over d5, and with that my d-pawn would be blockaded, and I think I would be the worse off in an isolated queen's pawn position. So I don't want black to capture. My general rule is if I can stop black capturing until move 15 or later, then I've got enough activity for the worst pawn structure. If black can take that d5 pawn before or on move 15, then black should have the better position due to my weakness of my pawns. So the 2 moves that stop black capturing are bishop b5 check, then knight d7. But I don't like this move, which I'll explain why later. But bishop b5 check is a booked line, and it's an okay move. It just doesn't really appeal to me. I played queen a4 check. And now if bishop d7, Then I have queen b3 attacking b7 and also defending d5. So knight bd7. Now I defend the pawn with knight c3. g6. So black is trying to fianchetto his dark squared bishop on g7, castle, and then start trying to win my d5 pawn back, which is the best plan actually. So black is probably has seen this line before. He's not confused. Knight f3. So I'm just developing. I'm trying to get my pieces active and developed quickly. I'm not going to try and grimly hang on to that pawn for the whole game. It's going to eventually drop off. Bishop g7. And now, this is the reason I don't play bishop b5. I played bishop c4 here. And the point is that bishop c4 is the square for the bishop. It defends the pawn on d5. Also, the bishop is pointing at f7 and the g8 square, so that could be a useful thing in attacking the castled black king. And also, on b5, it can easily be kicked with a6. So this is why I don't like bishop b5. Generally, black will play a6 a bit later, and my bishop will be forced back to c4. So if I've taken 2 moves to move the bishop in that other line with bishop b5 check, so why not just play bishop c4 first time? Also, in the bishop b5 line, the white queen usually comes to a4 anyway. So why not just cuss out that unnecessary bishop b5 move? Here, black castles, and there's an idea now. There's a move available to black after castling. If white simply castles, then black can get a better position with knight b6, attacking my pawn with 3 pieces and also forking the queen and bishop. Queen b3 to defend the bishop and the pawn. And now black can take the bishop. I'll recapture. And this is just a little bit awkward for me because I've lost the bishop pair, which is a endgame. It's a factor that comes in especially in the endgame. So black could be better then. And also, I've lost a useful defending piece in defending the d5 pawn. So the moment black wins the pawn back, I'm going to be a bit worse, and possibly worse for the rest of the game, because the 2 bishops are a long-term advantage. Maybe here, maybe a6, d4, b5, queen b3, and then bishop b7. And I'm going to lose the pawn next turn. And I believe we haven't quite reached move 15 yet. We haven't. Yeah, I don't think we've quite reached it yet. So my rule holds true in this case. Wait, have we reached move 15? Sorry, I'm just looking. Have we reached move 15? After I castle, queen b3, queen takes, d4. Yeah, okay, yeah, so yeah, I was right, yeah. So black has won it back on or before move 15. Okay, I was just checking because I like to know. I think there was actually move 15 that black took the pawn back. So here, what I want to do is prevent that plan from being so useful. I play the move d3, which helps out my c1 bishop. I can develop it, and does a very useful task in defending the c4 bishop. Now, if knight b6 and queen b3, if the knight takes the bishop on c4, I'll recapture with the pawn, solving my pawn structure problems and pretty much permanently defending that d5 pawn, which will no longer be weak. So he plays a6, threatening a fairly obvious move, but I have to be very, very careful. You might have spotted something and thought that I don't need to be worried about this, but there's a hidden tactic. If I play a move that doesn't address the problem with, let's say, a castle, black can fork queen and bishop with b5, and it looks like the a6 pawn is actually pinned though, because if it moves, my queen can take the rook. So I will play bishop takes pawn. But there is a way for black to actually win the piece. Knight b6, attacking the queen, and more importantly, defending the a8 rook. So wherever my queen goes, let's say b3, now black can take the bishop. And I'm going to be a lot worse at being a piece down and only a couple of pawns to show for it. So that's a key move, and I solve it by playing queen a3. Queen b3 would be a disaster because b5 would trap my bishop. Queen a3 is an odd-looking move. So I think some of you might have played a move like queen c2 to allow the bishop to move to b3, and the queen does look more safe on c2. But if I don't have very active pieces, then it won't be any kind of problem for black to win the pawn on d5 and catch up in development. So I need to keep my queen active and creating threats. Queen a3 does attack the e7 pawn. I'm not threatening to take it yet, but I could add some extra pieces on to attack e7, because black's pawn is just as paralysed as my d5 pawn. If the e7 pawn moves, I will take it with the d5 pawn, and then I'll still be a pawn up. And black won't have an easy pawn to target. So here, if knight b6 to attack my bishop and attack my pawn on d5, I will defend both with the queen. And now it's quite hard for black to attack the d5 pawn with anything else, and also difficult to find a good square for the c8 bishop. Black wants to fianchetto it usually, so knight b6 is not ideal. Instead, b6 was played. Now I can castle. Bishop b7. So we have two pieces each, attacking and defending, so I'm not losing the pawn just yet. Rook e1. Attacking e7. So before he defends it, he kicks my bishop, and I move it back. Now rook e8. So we're at move 13, and I still haven't lost the pawn yet. I play bishop e3 to develop my last minor piece, and I feel that I'm slightly ahead in development because of my queen being more active than black's queen. Also, I've got a slight space advantage due to my d5 pawn, because it does have a cramping effect while it's on the board. Now, knight b6. So it looks like black is going to win the pawn back because we're on move 14 now, he'll win it back next move. But I had an idea here. I played the move. Well, first, actually, I calculated this variation. Bishop takes knight, queen takes, and now I win the pawn on e7, which looks very good, but black has a fantastic move here. Bishop f8. My best option is unfortunately to lose the exchange. Rook takes bishop, queen takes, and because his queen's moved off of b6, my queen does have an escape square of a5. But I've lost the exchange, and I'm going to lose the pawns on, I think, d5 and d3 at some point. So black will just have an exchange for nothing and be better. So I don't play that. Instead, I played the move d6. which is a very odd-looking move, but there's a reason behind it. The trouble now for black is that if he takes on d6, then his pawn structure is just as bad as mine, and I have more active pieces as well. So if he takes with the pawn, I could play bishop f4 as a move to attack d6, and then later on, perhaps I could take the rook on e8 to try and deflect his queen from a few useful squares. I also have bishop d4 with the same idea. Rook ac1 might be good if he took, so he would be slightly behind in development. Instead, he chose the very odd-looking move, bishop takes f3. So at this point, I'm thinking that if I take back with my pawn, he will then take back on d6 with his pawn, and he'll have a better pawn structure because I'll have lots and lots of isolated pawns. Almost all my a majority of my pawns will be isolated, but I will have the two bishops. However, I think my pawn structure is more of a factor than the fact that I have the two bishops. So I don't want to take his bishop yet. I take e7 first. So I'm winning the pawn for good now, because after he takes, d3 is not going to be able to be captured. He takes with the rook, which is the only move, really. Now I take the bishop. So he cannot play queen takes d3 because his b6 knight would be under attack, and his rook on e7 is under attack from my queen. And here he blundered, unfortunately. Perhaps knight b to d7 was the best move. Instead, he played knight d5. So what do you think I played here? Well, there's two options that are very, very good. I could take with the bishop, then if knight takes, I have knight takes knight, and he can't take my other piece on d5 with the queen because his rook on e7 would be under attack. But he does have the resource rook b8, which I did briefly look at and felt that I didn't like for me. So now b4 is being threatened by black. It's just a very annoying threat. So if queen b3 to guard the bishop, he has b4, knight e4, knight takes bishop, bishop g5, and then black will lose the exchange, but I felt this was unnecessarily complicated, and also I was uncertain if I'd seen this line all the way to the end, and I wasn't sure if black had some sort of resource that I was missing. So I decided to play more simply with knight takes knight. And now black took with the knight, I took with the bishop, and I'm attacking both rooks at the same time, attacking the a8 rook with my bishop and the e7 rook with my queen. So if he moves the rook, now I can just move the bishop back to b3. He didn't do that though. He played rook takes e3, giving up the exchange, which is better than losing a piece. So there's no way for me to keep the extra piece and just be a rook up. But I did miss a couple of good moves here. I could have played bishop takes rook, which would make the queen look a bit stupid after rook takes e1 check, rook takes e1, queen takes a8. I'd have a slightly better position there. But at the time, I thought I'd seen a really good move with rook takes rook. I felt that f takes and queen takes d5 might actually be bad for me, it looks really silly because all my pawns are now not isolated apart from the h pawn. But the thing is, because my pawns have now all advanced a square, my king is a little bit uneasy, and the queen could come around and attack the pawns from behind. So I just didn't feel this was right. It looked a little bit weak for my king. So instead, I took with the rook. Queen takes d5, and now rook a to e1. So I felt that my pawns weren't too bad because my king would be defending them the whole time. The pawns do provide shelter for the king, and as I've doubled the rooks, I can swap off a pair of rooks. And the more I swap, the closer I am to victory. h6. Queen b3 first, just trying to make his queen go away from the centre, where it's most powerful. Queen g5 check. King f1. Queen f5. Now I do take off the rooks. King h7. And here I just defend my pawns with king e2. And I was quite pleased to note that there are no queen checks. There's no square at the moment where the queen can put me in check where I can't take it, even if you could magically transport the queen to any square on the board. So at this point I was quite convinced I had a win imminently. Queen d7, attacking the rook. So I moved the rook to e4. I want to keep it on the e file just to stop any checks. Queen c7. He's being sneaky. He's going after my h5 pawn, h2 pawn. Sorry. And here, I'm not sure if I did the right moves. I was easily winning according to the computer, but on a human level, it's very hard to win this. At least finding the best moves over and over again. I played d4, and the idea is just to push my d pawn and try and win with the passer. And he doesn't play queen takes h2 because I have queen takes f7. So that's my reason for not defending h2. f5. And now I really don't want to play rook h4 because, can you see why rook h4 is such a terrible move? Yeah, he has a fork with queen e7 check, and I'm losing the rook on h4. So instead, I played rook e8. It's always good to threaten a checkmate in general. And after h5, to prevent it being checkmate, I felt that after queen g8 check, his king goes to h6, and I don't really have a good follow-up, and I don't really want my queen all the way in the corner over there, where it's less active than on b3. I had a few moves available to me. According to the computer, the best move is d5, pushing the pawn. Now queen takes h2, queen b4, h4, d6. So my entire play is going to be about pushing the pawn. Bishop f6, queen c5, queen f4, d7, and white is completely won here. After h3, rook f8, bishop g5, pawn equals queen, bishop takes, rook f7, and I have a checkmate here. After king h6, I do a check, 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 and then black is completely lost. And the best move is the rather funny looking f4. So the best move is actually moving the king away. So because queen g5 mate was being threatened, so rook takes, king takes, mate. Of course, I don't think a human could see all that from this position. But pushing the pawn is the more natural move. Instead, I thought that h4 would just shut in the king a little bit and also prevent black pushing the pawn any further. So after queen d7, it's a little awkward for me. I played queen g8 to protect the rook, and then with tempo be able to play d5. But now my queen has left b3 and is stuck in the corner, so there's the possibility of black being able to do a perpetual check. Queen c7, d6. So what I saw was black could have played queen c4 check a moment ago, and then my king can never come around to g2 and be safe on the other side of the doubled pawns. So with queen c4, that would stop me coming to f1. Then if I move my king to e1, he'd have queen c1 check, and he would just keep checking me and stopping me moving to f1, and it would be a draw. So d6 prevents queen c4 because my queen is guarding it. Queen takes d6, and I thought I had a clear win because of the sacrifice on d6, because I thought I had queen f7, and my plan is to play rook e6, which would attack the queen and threaten queen g6 mate. But I forgot that rook e6 would stop me controlling c4. So then he would continue to have the perpetual check. And I felt quite pleased with myself here because, according to my computer, I played the only move which keeps an advantage for white. I played b3. So now my pawn is guarding c4 forever. And also it prevents it getting taken by the queen for nothing. So at b3, queen takes h4. And at this point, we'd reached move 35. I had 69 minutes, and I'd started with 100, so I'd used up less than a third of my time. And he had 16 minutes, and there's 5 moves to go before move 40, where we get an extra 50. So he was a bit short of time here, but I did get careless. I played rook e6, queen g5, and then I got greedy. I should have gone for the simple plan. What the simple plan is that black's only real chance to draw is to find a perpetual. So the only piece that can really do that is the queen. So if I can trade queens, I should be able to win the rook versus minor piece endgame. And I can do that, and I saw I could do that with rook e7. And because I've just tempted the queen to g5, if the black bishop moves, queen h7 will be mate. So the only move black has is queen f6, and I can take it. Then fork the bishop and pawn, win it, and I should easily win this endgame, because what's the sort of final nail in the coffin is that black's passed pawn, the h5 pawn, is what's called the wrong rook's pawn, where the promotion square, the h1 square, where the pawn is going to end up, is not the same color as the bishop. So black's bishop cannot influence h1. So hypothetically, my king could just stay on g2 forever. And no matter, even if the pawn got to h2, I could just keep the king on g2, and black would never be able to safely push the pawn. So the kingside pawns that black has are useless, and I can, at the very least, trade one of the pawns on the queen side and use my rook to support the advance of my remaining pawn on the queen side, and that should easily be enough to win. But I didn't do that. I got greedy and careless. And I think this proves that you can just play simple chess at a certain point. If you've got a winning endgame, go for it. It makes it so much easier. I played rook takes a6, with the idea being to play rook a7 next move and have a slightly superior position. But here, bishop c3 was played. Now I have to deal with queen d2 check, and there being ideas of perpetuals. So the move which the computer gives is rook c6, then black can't quite get a perpetual, because here I have the move king h3, and black now needs to get the bishop out of danger. So rook c6 was an interesting move, and it does attack a piece and get the rook to a more central square. But I didn't do this. I actually made a terrible blunder. I played the move f4, and I thought I was being so clever, because the queen can't get off the g file, as queen takes g6 would be mate. What I missed, though, is queen g4 check, king e3, and then queen h3 check, and if I move my pawn, black has queen g2 check. And this, I think, is a perpetual here, with queen d2 as mate, so I need to play check, bishop back, queen takes f5. But now I think black has a perpetual with moving the queen around and checking me, because his bishop is still on those dark squares, so I can't escape with the king. This is tricky to see, but I saw it right after I played f4, and when he played queen g4, my heart sank. I played king e3. I was waiting for that hammer to fall with queen h3 check, and I was going to then play king e2 and try and find a clever way of escaping. But I think I would have had to settle for a draw. He played, though, queen g1. Now I've got a chance. I still had to find a very accurate move, which I did right on the time control. We're on move 40 now. I played queen f8, check. And unless black wants to get mated instantly, he needs to play bishop g7. So I've got the bishop out the way. Now queen takes f5. And the slight difference between this position and the position I showed in that earlier drawing line is that my pawn is not on f3. So my king has f3 as an escape square. Here, if king h7 was played, but here, just to show, if queen e1 check, I have king f3, and then wherever the queen checks me, on d1 or on h1, I'll move the king diagonally down to e2 or g2. So if queen d1 or queen c3, I have king g2 and there's no checks. And if queen h1, I have king e2 and no more checks. So here he played king h7 to make the pawn taking the queen possible. And I want to keep the pin on the pawn and keep pressure on it, so I play queen d3, queen e1 check, king f3, queen g1 again to protect the pawn. And I just want to make sure I've got a win here. I can't see a way of swapping things off, so I play rook b6 to go for the pawn. Queen g4 check, king e3, queen h3 check, king e2, queen g4 check, king f1. So again, because my pawns are actually one square apart, with the third rank clear, my king will always have enough space to move around the pawns and eventually run the enemy queen out of checks. h4, rook takes b5, and now I was expecting h3 where I had the move rook g5, which would win fairly quickly, but queen takes f4 was played, so I found a forcing sequence here. Rook h5 check, and the pawn can't take the rook because of the pin. King h7. And now I want to make the king run out into the open. Queen d5 check, checking along the light squared diagonals, so there's no intervention with the bishop. And if black blocks the check with the queen, great, I'll swap off and take the pawn on h4. King f8, queen f8, queen d8 check, and now the king is forced to f7. So I could have taken the h4 pawn with my rook, but I felt then that his queen is still out and active, so I tried something a bit different. I played queen d7 check, and black only really has a few options. If king g8, then I have queen e8 check, and that will either swap things off or win all the pawns. But the two moves are king f6, and here I have queen c6 check. And the reason queen c6 check is good is that it controls the c-file, so black does not have queen c1 check anymore. When you're in endgames with queens, always try and look for how they're going to perpetual you if you're the one who's winning. If you're losing, have a look at trying to find all the checks you can. So I want to stop all of black's checks and then just reroute my rook. So king f8, rook h7. And now my threat is to do an X-ray attack with queen d7 check, king moves, and then my queen and rook will both be on the bishop. So after queen d4, queen c7 check, king g8, I can now finally swap everything off and win with my queenside pawns. Again, my king is close enough to h1 that he doesn't need to bother with black's passed pawn. So that was a possible line. In the game, it ended much faster, actually, with king f8. And here, I want to move my rook, so I play rook c5. Again, stopping c1 check, and also threatening rook c8 checkmate. Here, he resigned the game at move 53, and it only took me about 3 hours to win. So a very long game. The reason he resigned is that the only real way to protect against mate is king g8, but then I have rook c7 going after the bishop, and if his bishop moves, I'll have another back rank checkmate. So queen f6, and I'll swap off again and get an identical position to earlier with a clear win in the king and pawn endgame. So I hope you liked this video. I think the key theme in it was just activity. It was the whole time. There's three real things that you have to look out for in a middle game just out of the opening. And the three things are king safety. How safe is the king? How safe is the enemy king and my own? Do I need to do something about that? So here, no. King safety is not an issue. Now, number two, piece activity. Can I develop my pieces and get them to better squares? Especially important in the opening, but also the middle game. So piece activity, that's what white is going for, and white does have a space advantage and more flexibility with the pieces, so that's what white is going for. And the third thing that you have to look out for in in all aspects of the game really, but more importantly in the middle game, is pawn structure or pawn weaknesses. Black does not have any pawn structure issues that I can see, and white has the very obvious one of doubled isolated d-pawns. So usually what happens in a middle game or an opening is that one of those three things is most important, or sometimes you can compensate for a lack of one of those qualities by having a very strong set of another quality. So in this case, I'm sacrificing my pawn structure for piece activity, which I felt I did quite well here. I got all my pieces out quickly, and I kept having threats. Like Queen A3 was important because of the threat on E7, which had to be met. Then again, piece activity, going for development. And here I then think, okay, my pieces are as active as they can be, so what I'm going to do is, my pawn structure is not really able to be repaired, so I will damage the enemy's pawn structure. And as it so happened, bishop takes knight was not really the best move. I think pawn takes pawn was, but then black's pawns are as bad as mine, and we have a very interesting game going ahead, where I will try to claim that my more active queen and sort of slightly better placed knights, I think they control more of the centre, that they'll be my active pieces will be enough for me to claim an advantage. As it so happened, I got a material advantage, and now I have to sacrifice my, well, here he'd sacrifice the exchange, but I'm going for piece activity over pawn structure for the rest of this game. And then at this point, it's all about king safety now, with the perpetual checks. So I've sacrificed my pawn structure, but the pawn structure is very useful in keeping my king safe. And I need the active pieces. And I give up a bit of my pawn structure there because the pawn was a passed pawn. It was very useful there. But I do that to get more active pieces. Again, giving up my pawns for more active pieces. And blunder aside, this was the blunder. Blunder aside, my doubled pawns are actually giving up their mobility to allow my king to be more safe. And then my piece activity wins the game. My queen is useful in blocking all the checks, and my rook can pick off the pawns. And then black's king safety is the final factor in the loss. So black's pieces aren't active enough, he doesn't have enough checks, so my king is safe enough because of my pieces and my pawn structure. And then finally, king safety is not an issue, but the pawns are. So those three things can change at any point, but those are three things to bear in mind. Pawn structure or weaknesses for both yourself and the enemy. How active are your pieces, and how can you restrict the activity of your opponent, and how safe is your king and how safe is their king. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be trying to do another one for tomorrow. Today I have another game in the 4MCL, so wish me luck. And I'll comment, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.